Hi, Gustav. Very welcome.
Thank you very much. Hi,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
This is very sad, Ola. This is the first time I've been called a veteran. So for 35-year-olds, that's quite sad, but fair enough.
Well, it takes the first, 20 years, and then you feel used to it, and it feels kind of nice. So
Fair enough.
I'm okay with being a veteran. But no, I wanted to ask you a little bit about sort of Google's view on technology, sort of overarchingly, and drilling it down into what you see happening in cities and in buildings, and your take on that.
I think it's first of all, I just came back from Brussels, hence me being a bit late here, texting you on the way here. But we just opened up a space in Brussels at the train station, at which, together with a couple of partners, in which we saw actually sort of abandoned part of the train stations, at which we see that we're actually going to have to invest a lot in sort of people and digital skills going forward. We're seeing this transformational shift in some of our markets. So yesterday we opened up actually this new space. I mean, regardless, I've been with Google for 11 years. We started this sort of very, very small sort of office hotel just down the road here, and seeing now we're close to 300 people in the city of Stockholm. We have a partnership with you guys, and we're looking into more venues and just sort of engaging much, much more. And the change that Google did a couple of years ago, going from Google to Alphabet, and seeing a lot of the very interesting companies coming out of that, Sidewalks Labs, Waymo, our self-driving cars, and just a bunch of other stuff. It's very interesting to see that sort of the machine learning and the connected society that we heard about earlier here is sort of very much sort of venturing into our everyday lives, regardless of it being Nest at home, or we launched a product yesterday, actually, I don't know, the earbuds, for example, that connects so that you can actually hear real-life translation in your mobile phone straight to your ears in the new phones. So just a ton of very interesting stuff that in which technology actually goes from being sort of only for you to actually having a fundamental impact on our everyday lives and our society that we live in. And I do think we're only seeing this sort of very sort of exponential beginning to that. I was in California a couple of weeks ago, and I saw and got to test some of our self-driving cars. And it's quite interesting when you have sort of the product manager standing there, you have a car coming like at 30 kilometers an hour, and he said, you should just jump in front of it, and there's nobody in the car, and you're slightly nervous about it. But just seeing sort of how we can actually use machine learning and data to sort of make our cities more livable and actually have sort of allow ourselves to be more human, I guess. I think that's very
But I think the interesting thing with what you're doing is that you're impacting a lot of industries without setting out to do that initially. So you make ways of working more efficiently. So I stay at home, so the office needs to be smaller.
Yeah.
Well, or you create a self-driving car, so we don't need the parking spots. So there's opportunities to build new houses.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ways where what Google is doing is really, if you understand sort of their take on the future, a lot of gold nuggets can come out in how to sort of build your own strategy. So that's why I want to hear a little bit on sort of how do you see a city like Stockholm? What are going to be some of the major changes or things that are being different 5 years ahead in time or 10 years ahead in time, especially with a focus on how we would work?
I mean, obviously, Google is very, very committed to Stockholm and has been committed to the Nordics for a very, very long time. And we're seeing that in 2030, I mean, the amount of people living in Stockholm is going to increase by 50%. So we fundamentally believe that we have products that can make that transition quite smoothly. Because if you're looking in San Francisco, for example, you need to be in a car an hour and a half just to get to work. I mean, 2 miles down the road.
Yeah.
So, for example, I do think, as I said earlier, we're living in a very interesting time in which data that used to be for the very, very few, and sort of technology that used to be for the very, very few in terms of machine learning, now very rapidly is moving into our everyday life. Just take, how many of you tested Waze in here? Quite a few of you. It's a pretty neat product, right? Works quite well. So I mean, what if we can actually take sort of data and technology that we have in Waze to optimize public transportation in Stockholm? What if we can use actually the cars that we have to do Google Street View to measure air pollution, like we've done in Rio de Janeiro, and which we're actually wanting to sort of see if we can do in Stockholm? I mean, suddenly you're seeing a lot of these sort of technology that was like, oh, there's a new area for this as well. So for us, we think that we are not a single source of truth by any means. We think even though we've been successful in the past, doesn't mean we need to be successful in the future. So hence we are investing quite heavily to actually be on the ground, to meet with startups, to work with Epicenter and a bunch of other companies, because we think that we can provide technology, but it's very interesting to see what companies can actually do with that technology. So hence sort of looking at Waymo, self-driving cars, for example, working with a ton of companies there. I mean, most of the products that you see that are Google is actually often integrated into something else. So from that aspect, I think we're only on the verge of seeing a lot of sort of really sort of technological leapfrog within the coming few years. I mean, self-driving cars has been around for quite some time. They work, believe me, they work. I mean, there's 1 million people dying in car accidents every year around the world. So I mean, these are fundamental problems that we need to take care of. So for us, it's about sort of how quickly can society adapt to the technology, because right now, this is just a gut feeling. I think that sort of technology is sort of slightly ahead of us. So how can we use technology to integrate people, sort of newly arrived into Stockholm? Can we use Google Translate for that? I mean, there's tons of areas that we sort of are just sort of starting to think about within this space.
We heard about a report here coming out. It's the future of work.
Correct.
And next week, Eric Schmidt, your chairman, is actually coming here to Epicenter, and you're
Yes.
going to have an event about the future of work with
Yes.
leading politicians and others. Could you sort of spill the beans? Are there some things you could share here? On what
Without
is
giving everything away that my chairman will tell later on. I think, I mean, this is a challenge that I think we're seeing not only Sweden but throughout the whole of Europe. We're seeing that machine learning and automation is putting a lot of pressure on our workforce. I mean, if we talk about if we're very excited about self-driving cars, we have 3 million people sort of driving a lorry around Europe. How do we actually make sure that we see technology as a solution and not as this sort of massive challenge and big beast coming towards us? So we think there will definitely be a transformation of the workforce, and I think that company like ours and everybody should sort of take the responsibility and be a part of that. I mean, in Sweden, we're doing actually we're training over 20,000 people in digital skills, and that can be everything from setting up your home web page, setting up a Facebook page, or whatever. We're trying to be fairly agnostic to that. And in Amsterdam, we're actually opening up a whole new building in which we're giving everybody sort of, once again, digital skills for free. Because we think that if city evolve in the pace that they're at, we need to be there to sort of take responsibility and sort of teach people what we believe in for whatever it's worth. But that's, I think, no question about it, that you will see a short-term challenge in terms of very rapid transformation of the workforce. So the question is, how do we sort of vaccinate our workforce in sort of in just a very, very sort of both high-skilled skills, but also, I mean, sort of figuring out how we transform the people that are doing jobs that might look, like we heard earlier, that it might look completely different. But at the same time, we've heard this in the past. I mean, everybody thought when the ATM was arrived that all bank tellers was going to go away. Was actually more bank tellers in the US now. So I think we will learn throughout history, but needless to say that we need to pay attention to this, and I think the way for us to do it is to sort of very much engage in the community and sort of find those amazing startups that are using our and other products to create real products and real solutions.
When you said that you changed the name to Alphabet and sort of signaling an even more ambitious vision for the future, there's an R there, maybe real estate, I don't know, but I read in the papers today that you're creating a city 3 times the size of Gamla Stan in Toronto, which is going to be completely digital. It's a rumor, it's all over the newspapers. Could you comment on that rumor?
You said that this was going to be a nice interview. As I said, I read it in the paper this morning as well. I mean, we don't comment on speculation, but yeah.
But it's going to be amazing.
No. I think it's sort of, if you should go and check out one cool Alphabet company, Sidewalk Labs. I think that's sort of very, very relevant.
Sidewalk Labs?
Sidewalk Labs. It's a company within the Alphabet structure. It is a very cool company that is working around these sort of smartest city examples. A lot of the stuff that I talked about, sort of air pollution, air view, Project Solar, which is most people haven't heard about, which is Google taking Google Earth image to actually understand which houses in your community are eligible and could be very sort of profitable in terms of solar energy, for example. And it's a free product that just uses. So there's a ton of cool stuff that company does that I would urge you to check out. It's quite nice.
If you would be headhunted and made the CEO of a real estate company on Monday, what are some of the things, the mindsets from Google, the ways of thinking and working from Google that you would bring into that job?
I mean, we talked about that we were a mobile first company, and now we're an AI first company. We talk about, but
so AI first company. So let it sink in. You're not a real estate company first. You're not a money-making company first. You're an AI first company. And just to share an example, I was with one of the top executives on a trip with Google in Googleplex, and when they launched the glasses, and then somebody said, "But if that works, then nobody would click on your ads, right? Then your revenues would go away." Yeah. But you're still launching it. Yeah. Always follow the user. We'll figure out a way to make money if hundreds of millions of people like what we're doing. That's a pretty radical way to look at innovation.
And I think sort of we talk, for me, that I spend a lot of my time on is sort of voice search, for example. And we're seeing now, we launched yesterday also a new version of the Google Home. We saw Alexa here earlier. And I mean, I'm quite fascinating with my 4-year-old daughter actually walking up to our Google Home and say, okay, Google, play Frozen on the big TV, and it works for her. So with that, that's going to put a lot of pressure on both sort of real estate owners. How does our shopping experience going to look like in the future? And I mean, for us, we are very much thinking about that from sort of a local context in terms of Sweden. Who do we need to partner with? Maybe somebody in the audience here today. I mean, in the US, we're partnering with a ton of companies around the sort of connected home and around also sort of what we need to bring in terms of services. Is it where sort of, okay, Uber, or say, okay, Google, order me an Uber, okay, Google, dim the lights in the upper room, whether that's a Philips product or whatever. I mean, there's just tons of stuff that we need to acknowledge that this is not a one-man show. This needs to be a very partner-first centric. So I think sort of identifying the big trends, which I said, I think voice is crucial, and sort of AI, obviously, but I think it manifests itself very well in sort of voice search and what you can do with it. And then second of all, sort of figuring out what roles sort of partnerships should play in your strategy going forward, acknowledging that you are probably not the single source of truth. What does that mean in terms of partnership? And as I said, we're very open to sort of have discussions with both partners and sort of interesting players around what we can do, because as you heard, I mean, some of the most successful products that we've done in the past is based on partnerships. So
an open invitation to co-create and innovate.